Welcome to A Growing Concern. We're going to talk a little bit with a local video collective called B Media, who are doing great work collecting what's going on out there in the streets and with different issues that are going on around town and in the local area. And B Media started a while back, and there's been a lot of local people that are involved in it. You know, it's kind of going down the same road in its own way as the Flying Focus Video Collective with Dan Handelman and those folks that have been doing it since 1991. And it's great to see more people getting online because there's a lot going on in Portland, and you know, one person or one group of people just can't cover it all. So on my immediate right, we got Nat Needham, and then we have Tim Rice, who has actually been on this program, not my program, but the Independent Producers Organization with Amanda a while back. And we learned a little bit about your organization, and we're going to learn a little bit more tonight. So who wants to be the first one to talk about how you guys got started? Did you both start it yourselves, or?
Tim should go.
Nat kind of instigated the reformation of it. I think we talked about it before with Amanda that there was this group, B Media subcommittee of PCASC, maybe 4 years ago.
PCASC is?
Portland Central America Solidarity Committee.
And they've been around a while, yeah.
1979, Latin America Solidarity Group. So it was a subcommittee of that group for maybe a couple years, and then kind of went dormant after this Portland Grassroots Media Camp event that we did. That was a weekend-long Skillshare series of like 50 workshops and other events, media, like grassroots media related, which Nat attended, I believe. So after that kind of fell off and was dormant for a while, Nat started bugging me about having more B Media meetings, and I was like, I don't think we're going to be having one anytime soon.
Yeah,
so
more meetings, huh?
He kept persisting, and once Amanda got into town, we decided to call a B Media meeting, and after that it kind of rolled along pretty quickly, actually. Amanda, which some of you may remember, talked about her time in Venezuela. She lived in the barrios in Caracas for about a year and a half, working with the media movement there, which is huge and inspiring, like hundreds of media collectives, which we try and like pattern ourselves after. So that's our goal. That's kind of like what we're trying to build.
I know that I've heard that before from many places. I know Joe Anybody, a local videographer, and other folks have been down to Venezuela and Mexico, and they don't have access to all the technology we have.
Yeah. So Joe,
but they do a lot more.
Yeah.
Joe is on a media delegation with Nat, with PCASC people. So that's another connection there.
Yeah, I guess my contribution to our history is that I did go down with the Peace and Media delegation, PCASC Peace and Media delegation. We had a number of veterans from Iraq, IVAW, Iraq Veterans Against the War, who were part of our delegation down there to speak out against U.S. militarism and the ongoing Plan Colombia plans, where we're spending millions of dollars in military aid to the Colombian government and building prisons and a number of other things down there. And I stayed on after this delegation, and I was actually living in the same barrio as Amanda. And we decided we wanted to make a documentary, and so we made a couple films about art and social movements in Venezuela, how collectives and groups and communities are using art to create new cultural spaces and transform their communities and their society. And it was a very inspiring thing for us to see. And so I think that this was part of the sort of impetus for us to start doing more stuff locally here in Portland. And I think since then we've started, I mean, we're continually evolving. And I guess right now we're working on a variety show that is trying to pull in a bunch of different local actions and events to try and get the good word out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, did you folks have any video making experience when you decided to get involved in this? That you had gotten somewhere else?
I had none until a few months ago. I mean, actually, the collective was already started, and I still didn't have any knowledge of editing software or even really how to use a camera. But I've learned from Nat and Amanda over the last few months, and now I'd say I'm pretty good at it. So that's part of what we try and do, is like propagate media skills, people that have their media skills, kind of like the each one teach one, like kind of philosophy that like someone knows something in the community, you have to pass off that knowledge to the next generation or the next group of people, and that leads to greater things, the greater good in the end. Like the more people that know how to make, like shoot a video, edit a video, that's going to help like the discussion, the discourse of society or whatever.
Well, I know that in my experience, is sometimes people that come into something with no experience in it whatsoever look at it with fresh eyes, and a lot of times those might be the people that come up with some of the most creative ideas because they don't know it can't be done.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I have no, for my part, no professional like training. But I grew up. Well, this is a different story, but I grew up in Asia, in Nepal, and in 2006, my first sort of video thing was working as a cameraman to go down and interview some of the women who were in the Maoist army. You can find out more about it if you look up Maoists on Google.
Maoist army would have been
many
years ago.
Well, but this is a current thing that was happening in Nepal in 1996. The Maoist Party of Nepal, for various reasons, launched the People's War, and there was a sort of low-intensity civil war going on in Nepal for about 14 years, and 15,000 people died in it. It was really, a horrific conflict. But at the end of this, when the Maoists rejoined the political process, we were able to go down to some of the remote districts of Nepal and actually interview these women. And it was the first time I really had a video camera in my hands, and it was really interesting to try and get the other side of the story from people that had been underground for the last 10 years. And that's really where I started getting interested in the film type of stuff. But just quickly, as you were saying, though, I think Tim and I and Amanda are all untrained, and Rio, our other collective member. And I think it is like a learning process. I think we're improving all the time, and we're figuring out a lot of stuff. I think we're inspired by a lot of other sort of local and or international grassroots media activists, if you want to call that, or people that are making their own media and are sort of learning from what other people are doing and learning from our own trials and tribulations.
Well, that was my whole idea, going down this avenue, because people complain about the media, the corporate media, but if you don't complain about the corporate media if there are ways to get out there and do it yourself. You can come down here, you can take the classes, and that's one level, that you can come in here and learn how to do this and bring your views on the community to the community. And there's other areas too, and then there's you can join a media collective that maybe doesn't have access to all this equipment, but they're out in the field and they can be very creative with what they do have.
Yeah. So I actually just wanted to say one thing about I think where we are today is a pretty exciting time in history for a number of reasons, and I think one of these reasons is that a greater number of people around the world have access to like digital technology. It's not perfect, that access, but more people have that, and
sure.
So like the playing field is kind of changing in terms of people being able to create their own narratives and tell their own stories that are personal and are not a sort of corporate party line, I think, in a lot, and
there's no filters you have to put it through.
No filters,
yeah.
And no sponsors, and so I think this is where we really start to see the power of media as a force for like free speech, democracy, if you want to call it that, in that it gives people an equal voice to play in a realm of communication that has traditionally been monopolized by sort of corporate and government interests. So.
Yeah, we've been doing a number of workshops lately where one of the central ideas that we cover is like this quote by George Orwell that talks about the democratization of a weapon. He talks about it in terms of a weapon, but like we think of it like that's the same with media, like communications. It's kind of it's a weapon. It's a very effective weapon because it's changing minds.
Sometimes it's the only one we have.
So during times of a democratization of the weapon,
or
whatever,
the technology of the time,
leads to more open periods. Like there's more opportunity for change to happen during those times. We feel that's kind of happening with this digital revolution right now, and like the fact that there's a digital divide, but it is getting cheaper. It's so much cheaper and easier to make a video now than it was probably even 10 years ago. Certainly 30 or 40 years ago it was almost impossible for most people to do that.
You could cite what just went on in Egypt with the cell phones and Facebook.
Yep, exactly. That's part of it.
It's getting to be more and more part of it. There was just a fellow on TV the other night that invented the cell phone, the brick as it was called, and then they talked about all the different things that the cell phone can do and all the different things that it will be doing in the future, and it's phenomenal. Originally, I think when I first joined up here, we had analog linear edit suites that were probably $100,000, and for all that would do, you can pick up a computer with some software for less than $1,000 right now and do better work with that than you could have without $100,000, 10 or 15 years ago. Like you're saying, the digital divide is there, but at the same time, access. So I take it, we're talking about access. You have your own edit suites and your own cameras and all that.
I think part of that is bringing that ability to people, not just saying this is available, but like, how can we organize to like pool resources? Like, we have been visiting a couple college campuses, so there's an opportunity there because typically they'll have like a big Mac lab where they'll have 30 computers that all have Final Cut Pro and all kind of programs on them. And if that's available, like that's a resource that people should, organize around. If you have like 5 students on a campus that are interested in doing the same kind of work, get them together, like get them talking to each other, and then like use those resources. And if you're not on campus, there's plenty of other ways to like, crowdsource is kind of like the term that's used.
Crowdsource, right?
Like you're using the available technology or like the available resources and sharing them and like doing it that way.
I can't speak to other towns and cities, but I do know, like as we've been going along and sort of developing as a collective, that we've been finding actually a whole bunch of organizations around town that do have media equipment that is available for people. Quite often these organizations will require you to go through a basic training. I know PCM is one of them. I think up on Killingsworth there's the CIO, there is the Portland Community College, there's
Ethos has one,
Ethos.
Like the Scanner newspaper has one apparently.
All of these places, and it just takes a little bit of research to do it. And I'm not speaking specifically about these organizations, but I think that there are a number of resources that are underutilized, that if people do have like the desire to get involved or produce your own media, it just takes a bit of research, and there probably is a sort of avenue for you to do that. The other thing I would like to say about the way that we create media, granted we do have computers that, we work on Macs. I think today you can get a secondhand MacBook Pro, which is a really solid editing computer, for anywhere between $500 and $700. If you're interested in your own personal stuff. But we really try and produce media with technology that is more readily available to a wider sort of demographic. So, we're talking like flip cams or, even like cell phone cameras. Things that people that aren't professionals will use, and we can make pretty solid media with all of that still, and I think that that's a testament to like the power of technology right now.
And there's footage available, because I know some of the I think the first clip that you're going to be showing, which this might be a good time to introduce that, starts out with some footage that you picked up somewhere. It was
Yeah.
You might want to just talk a little bit about that, then we'll play that one.
You want to talk about it
We
too?
got to this very exclusive media library called YouTube.
YouTube, all right.
So that's one of the main tools of what we do and what other people can do. I mean, what we do a lot is called political remix video, where people will rip stuff off the internet and like put it in a timeline and mix it with their material, and then take random other stuff.
That's some of
yeah,
your creativity.
Off camera. So yeah, that's part of what we do. That's what a lot of other people do too.
Right.
So this first clip.
Well, one thing I would like to say quickly about this, we really do try. I mean, we look for like public domain stuff, stuff that we can use under fair use doctrines. You got like you viewers, if you're interested in it, you should do some research on what fair use is. But yeah, we do take things from YouTube. I think it is a very important part of our process of like democratization to be able to actually take the media that we're fed and be able to like use it, dissect it, understand it, rehash it. I think it's really interesting in part, you know, like these revolutions in Egypt or, you know, YouTube here. These new sort of social networking platforms that we use to communicate, I can't speak too much to it, but it's really interesting to think of the idea of like the public discourse of, you know, I guess like where public opinion is formed is done so in private spheres. YouTube is owned by Google, Facebook by Mark Zuckerberg and a bunch of like venture capitalists that, you know, I don't know who they are, or do you? And so, you know, and these processes that have, you know, happened in Cairo and other places have all been on these private, in these private spheres. And I think that, you know, we all need to like start to really grapple with the ideas of what this means to us, that, you know, these communications are only possible through privately owned means. But as to this clip that we're about to show, just a quick few words on it. It's still kind of in the works, and it is going to be like the introduction to our new variety show, the third episode. It has some footage from a speech by Obama about Earth Day and the U.S. military using biofuels in the war machine. It has some old logging footage and some footage from Chernobyl, which happened. I think April was the 20th anniversary of Chernobyl, which is kind
April
of
April 26th, I think.
Yeah, it's timely as Fukushima in Japan has also just happened.
The theme is the environment, because there's Earth Day happened then, and like there was a lot of, for whatever reason, maybe it was because of Earth Day, there was a lot of events that happened around town and close to town that were environmentally themed. So it kind of chose the theme for us, and like it made perfect sense. So that's kind of like we're touching on that.
Mm-hmm. So you just took these different components and mixed this thing together, as you call it, a remix.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got 2 minutes of it here. We'll see what it's like.
All right, yeah, go for it.
Some of the press may be wondering why we are announcing offshore drilling in a hangar at Andrews Air Force Base. Well, if there's any doubt about the leadership that our military is showing, you just need to look at this F-18 fighter and the light armored vehicle behind it. The Army and Marine Corps have been testing this vehicle on a mixture of biofuels, and this Navy fighter jet, appropriately called the Green Hornet, will be flown for the first time in just a few days on Earth Day.
Then they begin their cutting their way into trees that may be as old as our civilization. So down they come, some of the world's oldest, biggest, and tallest trees. All of the world's history since Christ was born could have occurred during the life of perhaps one of these redwoods.
When a herbicide is effective as Roundup, it costs you less. It's Roundup at a new lower price. Now that's something to see your dealer about.
So the saws keep working and the axemen bring the tree down. Usually they fall just as the axemen figured. Trees that may be over 20 feet thick at the base. Trees that are so big that more than 20 houses can be made from just one tree. Trees that grow over 350 feet high.
Okay, so that was just, you know, mixing all that together. They're all saying the same thing, but it's kind of interesting how they could be positioned in certain places that they could tell a story on their own. Like you were saying before, the lot of the media that people listen to are in certain arenas or precincts or whatever, CNN or whatever. But we have access to it because of the YouTube, mainly, because a lot of that stuff that is put on corporate media that comes over our television is also grabbed off by other people and put onto YouTube. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, technically, I guess you're not supposed to do that, but it stays on YouTube. Well, so there must not be any copyright, because I put music up that I know the people had the copyrights to it, that I still got emails from somebody about it.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think to the first point, speaking to the idea or the fact that a lot of like news programs now are copied by sort of citizen journalists or whatever you want to call them, and put on YouTube is a really, really important archival tool for all of us, because it provides us a little bit more context to what the feeling of the time is based upon you know, what's being dictated, and we, you know, in the past have forgotten what was said the day before, or you know, a couple months ago, what was the last scare? Was it H1N1? Was it, you know, the oil spill? Yeah, bird flu, and I think it's really important for us to be able to like go back through those things. And also, I think a lot of mainstream media organizations now are using YouTube and stuff to put their own shows up there as well, which is great for us and for other people that want to have access to it. But I think that is a growing trend, and organizations like Al Jazeera, which as far as the mainstream media organizations go, is a really good one in its coverage of events in the Middle East, particularly in Palestine and Egypt. They are pioneering this thing as a corporate media group that they're putting up a Creative Commons repository where they put raw footage that their reporters have shot in various areas that is freely available for video producers to use.
Even if it doesn't make their broadcast, they still have it archived.
And it's raw, uncut footage. It's, so it doesn't have voiceovers or anything on it. It's got the sounds, and it provides people a little bit more ability to create their own media. You know, if you can't afford to fly to Egypt to be in the middle of, you know, the uprising there, you can get it even like legally under the Creative Commons license that Al Jazeera has been promoting.
And that's why YouTube and like other online resources are so good or important, is that most of this is professionally quality video, but yeah, you don't have to shoot it yourself. You just get to reuse it to your own purposes.
You know, another point you made is, you know, people said something and people have a short memory and they don't remember. Jon Stewart and his group has made incredible use out of politicians saying one thing and then a month later, 6 months later, a year later saying something else. And I don't know how they log this stuff and how they know where it is, but they find it and they put that up there and they say this one thing, then they say this other thing. And that's really important because everything is being documented these days on video.
Yeah.
Everything seems like.
Yeah, one quick thing on Jon Stewart. If you haven't seen it, something on YouTube that might be worth looking up is Jon Stewart's interview with Bill O'Reilly on the O'Reilly Factor. It just happened. It was really interesting.
I didn't see that.
It talked about, I guess, a number of political prisoners such as Leonard Peltier and Mumia Abu-Jamal, and some of this controversy that Fox News was sort of embroiled in with poetry at the White House. Check it out. It's just really interesting to see how someone with a bit more of a calm and collected head can deconstruct a lot of the spin in the no-spin zone. So,
He does it in such, and the comedy keeps it from being so confrontational. So it comes across, I think, so much better into being confrontational. Like Ed Schultz the other night calling that one right-wing pundit a slut and losing his job for a week. You know, that confrontational stuff, it doesn't get there. But if you can do it in a
this was kind of confrontational. It was him. It was Bill O'Reilly and him
did get
talking to each other.
confrontational, huh?
But
He was
as
pretty
a real
calm
person,
and cool
you know.
about, like, you're not being logical about what you're saying. You're having double standards about, like, it was this rapper Common who had said something that, like, the right wing thought was terrible, and he's like, well, why don't you talk about these people? And like, Bill O'Reilly was kind of looked dumb in the way he was like to continue like attacking, like, why are you defending this guy? And he's like, well, why are you defending these people? Why are you doing this? Why don't you?
I think he compared him to something Ted Nugent had said, at least on a show he did.
Right.
Ted Nugent has just done some really, really raising hell. I think it was immigrants. I can't remember. And but that's kind of an aside there. But still, it let you know that we're talking about getting that up onto YouTube and then people being able to see it. That's a good point. That's what you folks are doing. But you also collect material here locally as well.
Yep.
So, you know, we've been side by side videotaping things before. And you do something with it, I do something with it. I put it on YouTube, you probably do too, and it can't get up there too often. And then I also put it on public access as well.
So the idea with the variety show is that we create a platform where news and views, events can be, you know, collected into a certain space that, like, people are like, oh, the next variety show is coming out. Like, I wonder what's in that. And like, we're going to have the same protest we and you were filming of the bank, the Dollars on the Bank by Rising Tide, the Dirty Coal funding.
Right.
So that's going to be on there. Hopefully, if it grows, if more people like kind of like check in when the next one comes out, if we like kind of like grow our outreach circles, that this can work to create like a more regional like identity in terms of like media collaboration. Like, we've been doing some of the recent travels, like we've gone out to Olympia, we've talked to people there who are either at Evergreen or in the community there who are interested in like making videos. Also connecting with groups that have been around a long time, like Media Island has been there like since like
forever,
1988 or something like that.
Been there forever.
Kind of like reconnecting those ties, meeting people in Eugene who, like, there were some students at the U of O who seemed really excited about maybe us coming back and like teaching them more about how to create videos and like sharing their stories of what's going on at their campus. This one guy, Zach, actually did send a couple videos to us, and I think we're going to put one of them in the variety show. So the idea is like collecting stuff from all around. I mean, this episode has this action that happened in Hood River. Like, hopefully the scope of it will be moved beyond just Portland, and that it can be collaborative, and that maybe there'll be, you know, a Bellingham or a Seattle variety show by another media collective or something like that, and then we can like kind of cross those wires and like get people sharing stuff in different places.
Well, that's a good example that you're bringing up, what happened up in Hood River, because I don't know how it's been done, but the corporate media has really not covered the tar sands and the heavy haul that is coming out, which is bringing, and we've talked about it before, bringing equipment through from South Korea up through Portland and up through the Columbia Gorge and along these highways. And I've yet to see anything on the corporate media about it. I've seen something about the tar sands on, I think, CNN or something like that. And it's going to devastate an area the size of what? England, New England? Enormous. It's enormous damage. And there's also pipelines, one to Vancouver and one to Houston, and they're just like going right over the top of people's lands, and of course the natives are always really poor, so they're throwing money at them and getting the right of way through there. It's an enormous thing that's going on, and no one's hearing about it. And so this is exactly what I think alternative media should be doing, is covering these issues.
Yes, I mean, I think we actually have a piece about that.
I know you do.
That we'll show in a minute, but I think you know, once again, going back to this idea of the democratization of technology, we now have the ability to produce media that is on par in its production quality as the corporate media. And so when sort of citizen journalists or indie media, video ninjas, whatever you want to call them, go out and cover these. I didn't coin that term, but when you cover these events and you make a piece that is, capturing maybe the essence or the feeling of what's going on in the street and communicating like a somewhat cogent or coherent message, and that gets out on the internet, you're kind of scooping the corporate media in a way. And, they can black it out as much as they want, however it suits their agenda. But I think the point is that there's a growing number of people that are willing and able to tell their own story and tell the story of like popular movements. And as that happens, I don't know, but I think quite often this can act as a catalyst towards better reporting by the corporate media, because it forces them to actually look at what's happening, because if they don't, they look like idiots if they're not like talking about it. And it remains to be seen whether or not they're going to talk about the tar sands, but I think the point is the more people that are doing it, the more they have to compete with to like keep up with the facts that are actually unfolding and not just stick to their narrative.
I would go further. I mean, that's on par with what they do. I'd say you can do much better than they do. They don't have any depth to what they talk about. Everything's a soundbite. Everything's like 5 seconds. If you can't say what you need to say in 5 seconds, they don't have time for you. So you can't tell a story of like natives being displaced because that doesn't fit in a 10-second time frame. So you can tell an actual story instead of like them just like kind of with their fake voices getting up there and talking like, this event happened today and blah, 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 blah. There's no connection there. There's no information being exchanged. So I think, like I said, I think you can do better. Like anyone can do better than what they do if you learn the basic skills behind it.
Yeah. So I guess also just one point on that is the way we make media. That I think, we're not wed to this idea alone, but what we've been doing up until now is not using voiceovers and, like text to explain what's going on necessarily. I think we've all seen a lot of like plasticness and sort of rigidity with people standing around with microphones, which is fine if you're doing it out of the goodness of your heart and everything. But what we like to do is really let people speak for themselves, and while in a sense we're able to edit that as editors, I think it is important to actually give people a voice, and it's not a man with a microphone explaining what an indigenous lady is saying or thinking over her voice that you can't quite hear in the background.
And give her maybe a sentence or two.
Yeah. So I think that is like a really important part of allowing people to tell their own stories, and we act as a medium or as an agent or conduit, I guess, for that voice to be heard. Yeah. So
So we got about a 6-minute clip.
Yeah, it's roughly 6 minutes long. Just another really quick overview of what this was. It was an action at Hood River on April 20th, which was the 1-year anniversary of the Deepwater Horizon disaster,
right.
the BP oil spill. And a bunch of people, local people, and some First Nations indigenous people from Canada came down to talk about the tar sands as our own sort of local environmental disaster that is happening and waiting to happen. And it's important and relevant to people in Oregon because as the sort of tentacles of globalization spread out, they're bringing heavy equipment that they have built in South Korea up the Columbia, through Idaho, up into Alberta, Canada, to work on this strip mine that, as Jim said, is roughly the size of England, or
will be,
or the size of Florida. And there's and thousands of people are or just all the communities and the life in general up there is being devastated by this project. But I think the film should make some of that apparent.
All right.
Yeah.
So we'll go into this 6-minute clip.
It's social justice! Crime justice! It's social justice! Well, we're actually just looking you up on the internet.
My name's Anthony.
Hi, Anthony.
Nice to meet you. I live here in Hood River. So we wanted to bring this resolution proposal and make sure that got to the city council members and the mayor. Also would like to be a part of the meeting that this agenda actually gets put on. The Alberta tar sands up in Canada are the most environmentally destructive project on the planet.
To raise awareness about the Alberta tar sands and the tar sands Giga project, and be in solidarity with the Klamath Nation, who are proposing to stop the heavy haul giant machinery from entering the tar sands region.
The actual extraction zone right now with the open pit mines is the size of the UK.
A lot of the equipment is being made in Korea and shipped. It's planned to be shipped up to Colombia.
Tar sands actually stretch from Alberta to Saskatchewan to Manitoba, so across the whole north.
It's a native issue, it's an environmental issue, it's a labor and worker rights issue.
They're proposing to put in 12 nuclear reactors in northern Alberta. We have some uranium deposits, nuclear gas. They're going to power up everything essentially that they can to get at this oil.
It's the year anniversary of the oil disaster in the Gulf. So I guess it's there's actions happening all over the country.
There's been actions in at least 4 countries that I'm aware of, in New Zealand, in Canada, in the UK, and here in the United States.
Oh, I seen the tar sand video, and it really touched me because the way it's affecting the water and all the life that springs from that. So I'm here today to support what we've all been, us Indian people have been fighting for, is this Mother Earth.
We have folks from all over here, from BC, Canada, from Alberta, from the Columbia Gorge, from Portland, from Bend, from Olympia, from Eugene.
We do know that there are people as far as like Trinidad and Tobago and South America, you know, the Congo, where there are tar sands, and they're going to be using the technology that they developed in Alberta to go in and mine in other parts of the world.
The oil is being shipped from indigenous lands in Alberta and making the land so toxic that indigenous people can hardly live there, with respiratory disease, lupus, cancer, lesions on moose and salmon.
We've said that it's genocide. You know, the Canadian government would disagree, and so would the American government. But we do understand like the need for cross-border alliances, particularly because of things like NAFTA, the MIA, the SPP, different international trade agreements, because we're locked into an energy agreement with the U.S. where 63% of our energy resources come to the U.S. no matter what.
You call it energy security, but really it's just the governments of Canada and America trying to secure energy for themselves.
You would think in a place like Alberta, where there's so much heavy crude and regular crude, it's like the Texas of the North, that we would have the cheapest gas prices. You would think a community of Fort Chipewyan and other places where the resource extraction is happening would have free oil and gas.
American military in particular is the largest consumer of Alberta tar sands, and those tar sands are coming from Dene and Cree territory and Métis and Blackfoot territory.
This whole scheme is completely undemocratic. Through the carbon trading system the Obama administration and other governments are setting up.
Indigenous sovereignty goes back to traditional laws, and the way a nation defines themselves, comes back to their traditional laws and their ways of life, based on hunting, fishing, based on how they use the land and protect and maintain the land.
They take these big big pipes, and they shoot steam and chemicals into the earth, and they heat up the oil, and so it separates out with those chemicals and with the hot water, the steam, and then they suck it out.
It takes 3 times as much energy to extract tar sands as conventional oil.
And what they do is, instead of leaving a big giant tar sands tailings pond of chemicals on the land, they leave it in the earth. And they're trying to tell our people and the people in Alberta and in Canada that it's safe, and we know better.
In fact, there's more energy put into tar sands extraction than you would get from it. So it's purely about corporate greed at the expense of indigenous peoples, wildlife, the biggest wilderness on the continent, water quality, the purity of the Columbia River, and all these communities.
If we allow the tar sands equipment and Exxon and Imperial Oil to solidify this is a route to get that tar sands equipment up to Alberta, Canada, it only solidifies the need for our dams.
This is a very, very special river. It's a very important river for people, for animals, for our community.
Dams have almost directly correlated with a drop in salmon population. They used to be the industry. It was logging and it was salmon that held and tied native people to their land and European Oregonians and Washingtonians to their land.
There are a few communities that actually brought back salmon to the river where it was almost wiped out. They brought it back through the traditional first salmon ceremonies. They didn't do that with the help of the governments. They didn't do that with the help of corporations. They did that on their own. They did that with the elders and the youth communicating and learning from each other so they could actually find ways to bring that back.
We know we come from the Mother Earth. We love our Mother Earth. We were taught like that by our ancestors.
Because we see that if we can stop one of the tentacles from happening, we can send a message to industry that people don't want heavy crude. They don't want this kind of extractive industry, and they realize the impact that it's having on all people, not just First Nations people, not just Canadian people or Americans, but what's really going to happen with the tar sands.
So that's what went on up in Hood River. Started out with an action here in town. Always powerful to have the Native Americans there with their music, the drum beat, the heartbeat, because what we did to them and their connection to the earth is really a parallel of what we are doing to ourselves, disconnecting from the earth, it seems like. So we got about, a little over 16 minutes, and we got another 5-minute clip. So any recap on what we just saw or introduction to the next one?
Well, I mean, we might need to talk a little bit, because it's not ours. It's
the next clip?
Yeah, it's like one of our inspirations, like again, like this idea of collaborating with other media groups, other media people, media makers. This is a guy from Australia called Robert Foster who does these semi-regularly, I think like every 2 months or so, rap news. He takes the news and mixes it up into a song, basically.
And he does this through the internet, YouTube or whatever?
That's the main medium of his communications is like YouTube, online, Facebook, whatnot.
Could I, before we get into rap news and all of that juiciness, just a couple things about that last piece we saw about the tar sands. At the beginning of it, I think it is very important. The action I felt was a very complete action. It was commemorating an environmental disaster that happened a year before, as I mentioned before.
Desecration.
Desecration. And then it also is really tying in a locality, Hood River, with a global process that's happening right now that is totally unaccountable and undemocratic in how it's been going about. There are these very large mining corporations that have been ignoring the people in the land, the needs of the people in the land, in their, I guess, greed for profit. So I think it is really important for local activists, even if it's token, to engage with local government sort of apparatus in terms of like city councils and things like that. Maybe not like get bogged down in it if it's not going anywhere, but I think like what they did that day was actually draft up a resolution that talked about why they were concerned about having tar sands equipment shipped up the Columbia. And you know, putting that as part of the dialogue in sort of city affairs does open up a wider arena in a sense for local people to be involved in it. And if for some reason you know, a city did adopt a resolution that is against the tar sands, it may only be token, but I think that provides a much stronger foothold in a sense for further events and actions that may occur, and so I think it is like an important part to recognize that as part of the fight.
It's instructional too, where people know about it.
Yeah,
and
and
they
it's
found
on the
out
records.
why.
Then, it's on the records, and you know, I'm not saying that you know, trying to change things through the government is the only way. I'm just saying that I think that is in some circles often overlooked as a sort of legitimate thing to do.
It's being strategic and like not being closed to different avenues for social change. Like maybe, I mean, probably won't. You know, the City Council of Hood River is probably not going to stop the Alberta Tar Sands project, but it's a way, like you said, to get the word out there, to get like legitimacy on your side, to show that they're, you know, what they're doing is illegitimate, and like your struggles are legitimate against that.
It isn't just easily marginalized younger people that are concerned about it.
I think also, though, it just provides like an opportunity, particularly for younger people that are maybe more willing or energetic than older generations to try different things. It does give them the backup option of being, yes, we already tried that and it didn't work, so we're going to try something else. The other thing, though, with this movie that I think, or that short that we just watched, that I think is important is the fact that these First Nations people did come down from Alberta. Native people in, you know, the frontline communities that are being affected by this extractive process. And hearing their stories is extremely powerful, and also the fact that, you know, it is cross borders. They had to come down across the Canadian-U.S. border, which is becoming increasingly militarized. You know, crossing those artificial boundaries that divide us to share our messages are extremely important, because they can move their equipment and their capital across these borders without any problem, you know, at the click of a mouse button, or, you know, up the highway or the river. But you know, the movement of people is continuing to be like restricted, and it's really important for us to be able to move around, which I think comes into like the last video part that we wanted to show. It's not our video, as Tim was saying. It is a video from the Juice Media down in Australia, and I think it is a testament of the idea of cross-pollination, of like good ideas, creativity, and fun that goes across borders, that can inspire us all and inform us at the same time.
That phrase, cross-pollination, is a thing the Beehive Collective uses. I don't know if you know about them.
I've taped them once when they were in town.
The giant like graphics that are really informative and really good art, and they like, people seem to be drawn by them just because it's like this expression that is like political, it's taking a stance, but it's really good at the same time. And like that's, I think, embodies what like political art should be. And like they use this term cross-pollination. They travel around, they meet other groups too,
they're East Coast,
and like try and get people talking to each other. Like the idea of cross-pollination is a good phrase. We like to use it too because it makes perfect sense. And so we want to do video and other kind of media cross-pollination, not cross-colonization.
Right. Well, it's a natural process.
In our medium. They're doing it in their medium, we want to do it in our medium.
Yep.
Right. So I guess we'll get into this because that'll give us about a little less than 10 minutes when we come back. So.
There's a lot of misinformation floating around about the operation that killed Osama bin Laden yesterday, so we will set the record straight this evening.
Hello and welcome to the show. This is rap news with that juice, it's essential to know. And while journalists claim to be first with the news, we prefer to learn, discern and turn up first with the truth. So without further ado, we're starting by charting the alleged last gasp of Osama bin Laden. We ask the tough question most pundits are dodging. What happened in Arindabatabad that morning? And joining us, regular guests on the news feed, the Pentagon's General Baxter and Terrence Moonseed. Gentlemen, welcome. We'll begin with you, General. How's the general atmosphere there at the Pentagon?
Incredible. This is just an enviable victory. The USA has made an indelible entry in history. A decade since 9/11, we found bin Laden and got justice for the 3,000 Americans that died then. His crime and infamy have been erased and healed, framed and sealed thanks to the bravery of the US Navy SEALs. Way to kill.
Tell us how it went down, the actual sequence.
SEAL Team 6 hit the compound. It was battle stations. They found Osama armed with an Islamic ray gun, shot him in the face, and
what's that? No ray gun? Oh, well.
Then he used his wife as a human shield, and what? That didn't happen either? Okay, well then they shot him and took no pictures and buried him according to Islamic scriptures in the sea? Yes, in the sea! And the president was or was not watching the live feed.
An extraterritorial hit?
The world's in our grip. Now our jurisdiction extends over all of it. So who's next? for shock and awesome judgment. Ahmadinejad, Al-Akawi, Assange were coming. Was Osama worth it? Yeah, he was worth it. We only lost 6,000 more Americans to murder him, but I didn't like how we treated his corpse. He's no hero. I'd have hanged Jordan and quartered him at ground zero. Where the 19 hijackers? Lies, Baxter, there were no hijackers. It was a demolition. A Reichstag on the Twin Towers by the twin powers of Bush and Cheney. Bin Laden wasn't in charge of mushing planes in. In fact, the planes didn't even exist. They were blue beam holograms projected to increase the mist. Plead the fifth, but thermite dust sits on the curb, and Building 7 is evidence that it's so absurd. You internet nerd, Osama did it. Distrust every word. This is our finest hour. Justice has been served. Justice? General, that's an interesting word to choose. We're a nation of laws. What other word would you use? Assassination? Slaughter? He's a legitimate military target, a murderer. But what about the precedent set at Nuremberg? What? After the Holocaust and 6 million dead, America stayed the hand of vengeance, and instead, Nazi leaders were rounded up and tortured? No. Waterboarded? Hired by NASA? No. Brought to court to be tried for crimes against humanity, then executed. What a tragedy. Please, Eurofag, don't history lesson me. Don't you get it? The true sign of a supremacy is who gets to decide at each given minute when the rule of law is applied and when it's suspended. You can't spell justice without the U.S. and it's called justice because it's just us that's justified in judging. Just cause, just wars, and just evidence. Just test this justice and get just ice if you mess with us and end up at the bottom of the ocean like Bin Laden. Osama isn't dead, or if he is, he died in 2000. This thing's rotten, no death certificate of public evidence, man. He's probably kicking back on an island on a CIA pension plan. Watch it, hippie, or get double tapped like Geronimo. That reminds me, why this codename Geronimo? Geronimo? That's Osama's codename? Let the truth be known, this reeks of the Masons and the Skull and Bones. It's a secret society of elite Yale students who stole the skull of the Apache chief and they use it in occult dark rituals like pagan druids, worshipping Satan, Lucifer, Cain, and Judas. The truth is, they're the ones who owned Osama and got the Pharaoh plasma to clone Obama. They're ruthless. They planned this end game to coincide with the May Day pagan festival of Beltane, a fertility ritual with blood sacrifice and Adolf Hitler's suicide dates match precise. That's a device to pledge and bow to the true rulers of the earth and renew the wedding vows. That's why Obama harpooned Japan, creating waves to hit him, and Prince Reptilian was married to Satan in the form of Kate Middleton. I ain't kidding with you when I'm yelling the truth. Illuminati's on the throne. That's the real reason why they called Osama Geronimo. It's a perfectly good code name. What's wrong with you? I see many Native Americans consider it dishonorable to have their hero, ancestor, and leader associated with terrorism and Al-Qaeda. It all seems like an appalling error. It wasn't an error. This right here is the war on terror, and it's a continuation of the 19th century campaign we had to wage to liberate the territory of the United States from the redskin savages who also hid in caves and kept on attacking us because they hated our civilized ways, our Christianity, whiteness, and slaves. Was the Apache defending their lands from the invasion of whites? They started it, Bob. Get your history right. Same with Al-Qaeda. We didn't pick this fight, so you see, the Geronimo analogy is tight. Alright, thank you both for your interesting views. Little wonder there's such confusion in the news when we can scarcely agree on historical narratives. Is there any mystery that we live in diverging realities? The tides of amnesia seem to be rising like the oceans, unchecked by mass media that is steadily corroding. More concerned with the rush to make headlines by 5 than helping us discern the facts from the lies. But there's a rival tide, an equal and opposite turn, a yearning to read between official lines that have blurred. I'm reassured by the many who were plainly disturbed and who questioned the way in which justice was served. If it was served, it can be served to us just the same. So what brand of justice do we want done in our name? Leaving you now with that thought in your mind, Robert Foster produced media, proud to ignore deadlines.
All right, and where do you go from here? Huh? That was excellent. I really enjoyed that a lot. I can understand what they were saying, and like you were saying, the art and the different ways of bringing out information. That's an incredible way to do that.
He said what we said in this hour in like 5 minutes.
Yeah. That's true. That's true.
You can.
You got about 4 minutes left.
You can check that out. thejuicemedia.com. I think it is probably one of the most inspiring alternative media things out there right now. And if you watch some of the other episodes, it's really remarkable on how much information and different sort of stories he's able to pull together and synthesize through rap and like inform people. And it, I think, is an example of good media that is accessible to a wider audience than people that are necessarily already aware of the things that he's talking about, particularly a lot of young people that might be at the mall or whatever. You know, maybe they'll watch it because they see it on Facebook or something like that and actually start thinking about it.
And it's rap, the genre.
Yeah.
And also I'll mention someone named Reverend Billy who does something the same thing, only he does it as a preacher. You know, that's his soapbox is as a preacher, whereas this fellow was doing it as a news reporter rapper. So there's so many things that you can do. So, you know, we don't have much time left, but what do you folks want to do in the future? You got plans for any
we're going to keep
projects?
Making our stuff and trying to deepen these regional connections. Something we are inspired also by is like this media co-op network in Canada called the Vancouver Media Co-op or the Toronto Media Co-op. And they have like a regional, like countrywide paper called The Dominion. I mean, that's kind of what we'd like to do is maybe have a Northwest printed edition of like news collaboration.
That's kind of Indie Media tried that, but it didn't go very far.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, I think Indie Media is a very important resource for us all, and we're in no way trying to usurp what they're doing. I think that the idea is to really add more voices,
parallel lines.
Dots on the playing field that we can connect, because I think we do need a much more vibrant you know, like media culture to encourage discourse, you know, because a lot of the things even that we say, you know, people may not agree with, but the fact that we're saying them and other people are saying things as well creates more room for discussion about what our values are as a society, as a culture, and will hopefully make us stronger and better at the end of the day.
The same way there's like 10 cable news networks saying the same thing. It's like, well, let's have 100 media collectives saying not the same thing, but like similar things, and like growing power in that voice.
Mm-hmm. Even if all these alternative media might be saying the same thing, corporate media are saying it in the same way.
And at least
this side says it in different ways.
And we're not being paid, so
there's no filter. We're down to about an hour or a minute and 20 seconds here, so thank you folks for coming on. You guys have always opened my eyes up, even though we're working parallel paths, but you see things I don't see, and that's what we're out here for, is to help each other do things. And the art aspect is important. So folks out there in TV land, I mean, one of the first things I learned when I got involved in this was I looked at TV different. I looked at the media different. You know, I was able to analyze it and look at things different. So take advantage of some of the opportunities. If you don't want to get something quite as formal as Portland Community Media or Metro East Community Media, there's the B Media Collective, which, you know, was something a little bit more eye level, and you can get in there and find out a little bit about it. Go to their website and see their variety shows. Maybe you can fit in, and maybe you've got something you can contribute.
Well, also thank you very much again for having us, Jim, and PCM for being here. I think you're a really important community resource. So.
All right. Peace out.
Peace out.
Peace out. I want to thank the
and
crew.
Check out the Real News as well.
Check out the Real News. And I want to thank the crew as well. I always try to remember to do that. I don't always do it. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.